Hey guys, let's make this timber frame sawhorse that's used for timber framing, so it's incredibly bulky, with some tools you'd find in your garage. Hopefully you have all of these.
While I'm flattening off this piece, I just want to explain that the part coming up is for complete beginners, and it's just some common best practices for clean cuts with a pole saw. I have one last cut I needed to do to have all my pieces for the sawhorse, which are the legs, but I thought I'd just give a detailed explanation for beginners on how to do that cleanly.
I like to mark on both sides of the piece of wood, then take a speed square and connect the dots. If you're using a pole saw, you want an exact cut. Get a razor and take your speed square and go back over the lines. Make a light marking, then a deeper one, which will set into the light marking, then a much deeper one, and then repeat all the way through. So the razor will ensure that the saw sits exactly where it needs to be all the way across. Sometimes what can happen when you're sawing a large piece is your blade gets caught between the tension of the piece itself. So what I like to do is take the speed square and just place it right underneath next to the cut. This way the piece is wanting to bend this way so it never pinches your blade. So we have all of our pieces we need to make this sawhorse. I'll give the dimensions again, but what I'm going to show you now is marking the mortise on the 2 feet and marking the legs for the tenon so we can begin mortise and tenon. So this is my foot piece and this is my leg, and I want to make the tenon exactly the length of the foot piece so it sits all the way through and flush onto the ground. So I'm going to go ahead and measure my foot just to get a measurement of the tenon that needs to be there. So I have my measurement, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make lines going all the way around the same way we did for cutting the feet, and that way I know how far down the tenon is gonna go. So now that I made my dots all the way around on the corners, I'm just gonna take the speed square the same way and do the whole thing. So for this tenon, instead of calculating the center piece, what I'm gonna do is just go 1 inch from the side of the 4x4 and mark on both sides. And this is just a 4x4 that you'd find at Home Depot. So I'm just doing 1 inch in on each side because I feel that that would be a good tenon for the mortise to sit into. So I have the sides marked on one end. I'm just gonna flip it over and do the same thing on this side. I put my speed square here. I'll take my mechanical pencil. I'll drop it in that 1 inch mark, hold it straight, and just run it across. And that is a perfectly straight 1 inch line from the edge. After you make your marks, you wanna X out the parts that are being cut off. So on this side, it's gonna put an X, X, and then even this big chunk. With a tenon and a mortise, This is the part where a razor and the speed square really shine. It's not a rough cut. This is something that's fitting into another piece, and you want it to be as exact as possible, especially if you're using a pole saw. And yeah. Another small detail when it comes to using the razor is when you're marking with the razor, you want to make sure that the blade is perpendicular with the speed square, because you know, with a pencil you have a tendency to kind of angle it in, but with this you got to remember that your saw blade is following the track of the razor mark. So perpendicular to the blade means perpendicular to the thing you're cutting. So it's another small piece, but it matters. So this is our tenon, and this length should fit in the foot exactly to the bottom of the floor. So now that we have our tenons cut out of the two legs, we're gonna mark and cut out our mortises for the feet. If you remember, my measurement was 32 inches for the foot, so we're just gonna mark 16 inches into the center. Mark 16, mark 16 as well, and just connect the dots. Now that we are 16 in the middle, we want to do the exact middle of the middle. So the 2 axis, we need the middle of that as well. We could measure this way and get the center, but if you have a milled piece like me and it's not exact, this is the method you're going to want to use. So you're going to take your measuring tape and you're going to find an even number. So I'll do 6 in my case, and I'm going to measure across 6 diagonally, and then from there we'll mark the center of the even number. And for me, we all know it's 3, so right there is my center. Now that we have the axis in the center, we want to use our tenon to mark out the mortise, because like I said, it's better to use the tenon as a marker than relying on every single cut to be exact. Yeah, okay. So from the tenon to the space here, we want to find the center. I'm just gonna pivot this, go to 4, because that's an even number, and then I'm gonna mark the 2. And then now that you have the center, you can measure. So if I say here, okay, and I flip it around and it's the same, then you know you have the center. We're gonna line up both of these center marks. And then what I'm gonna do is just mark the outside of the leg, and then I'm gonna flip it around and do the same thing on the other side. So now that I marked outside of the legs, I'm gonna do the same thing and just connect the dots. That way I have the width of my leg on the foot. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna extend this center line going all the way across. I'm gonna make the center line on the tenon right here. Go 2 inches, mark the 1, and draw the line out. Okay, so hopefully that made sense, but when it's all said and done, you should have marking like this, center, and then center here. That way, you can simply put your tenon up to this line, and that's gonna be our mortise mark. Here's our mortise mark. Now, what I'm gonna do is use these lines and the speed square to flip this into the other side, because ultimately the mortise is going to go all the way through. Now that we have the lines going through to the other side, what I'm gonna do is use this speed square and just get a measurement to the edge of where the tenon is going to be. So in this case, on this side, it's just under 2 inches. And so I'll flip it over once, twice, and then I'm going to mark from this side, because now that it's upside down, the side that I measured is now on the right side instead of my left. So we're just going to make a mark there and a mark there. Now I'm going to measure this right side, and we can see it's right at 2 inches. So I'll flip this over again and measure this opposite side, and we're going to mark right at just below 2 inches, and the same thing on this side. And because I have the dots, I'm just going to use the speed square. So now what we have is this tenon flipped to this side. You know, check those lines, and that looks great. So when we go to mortise this, we'll have both sides with razor marks, and the chisel will be a dream. Before I employ the drill and the jigsaw, I'm gonna go through and make those razor marks that I keep talking about, because if I'm using my drill and I just so happen to get too close to the line, the razor mark is gonna save me. So if you're using my method where the tenon is actually the template for the mortise, then I would suggest marking with your razor just inside the lines of your pencil, because you'll have a much tighter fit later on. And if the fit is too tight, you can just take away some of the wood with your chisel. So this is a perfect example of why we make the razor marks, because this is the other side of what we were just drilling. And if you take a close look, there's some blowout, and I went all the way through because I knew I had these razor marks. And you see these pieces that are chipping up right here? If I push that down, it stops exactly where the razor mark is. So using the jigsaw, connecting the 4 holes, we get this big chunk out, and that just saves us a lot of time. So by now we're at our hammer and chisel phase, and I want to talk chisels for a second.
I explain that a $15 chisel works the same as a $200 chisel as long as you sharpen it. The most important part of a chisel is the sharpness, and I can make a video or explain that, but that's really all it is how well you sharpen a chisel. And I also go on to do a little bit of mortising, but the camera died, so I didn't give a full explanation. But the key takeaway to mortising is just don't go all the way through, meet your chisel in the middle and flip it over.
Here's my test fit on the mortise and tenon. I think it looks pretty good, and you know, this is just a sawhorse, so it doesn't have to be so exact. But what I've been doing is, after I got the main bits out from going on both ends, you know, flipping it constantly, make sure there's no big blowout, I was taking my chisel like this and just, you know, running it along the inside to make everything flat, and trying to get it to a place where I know that this can be hammered in and have a tight fit. I'm gonna get my first mortise and tenon in, and I'm gonna use this rubber hammer along with this block here. Make sure I'm on a flat surface, and then I'm just gonna kind of tap it in. That's exactly why you want to use a block and not hit your main piece, because this just split in half. You have a smooth mortise and tenon connection, and smooth down here too. Preferably no gaps. I have a tiny gap here, but that's all right. You know, this is a sawhorse, so this is pretty good. Hey guys, it's a new day, and we're gonna get this top piece on of the sawhorse. And to do that, we just have to get these last tenons out. I already went and did one of them, so I'm gonna show you just an up close of marking and this concept of what's called casting the line when using a pole saw. There we go. So now we have them all marked, and I can use each corner to just line it up like so. Super easy. Super easy. So this is exactly why I do all 4 corners, because this one was slightly above, and you know, you kind of get the average of the markings. Yesterday we did 1 inch from the side of the 4x4. As you can see here, this is 1 inch on each side, which makes our tenon. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark that. Pencil in there and just run it down at 1 inch. Connect these. I'm going to do the razor marks. When you're using the pole saw, cutting on top of the grain, you want to use this side that has less teeth. This side is for cutting through the grain. Casting the line looks something like this. You're starting out in your razor mark, and what we're doing is we're going down the vertical line here first, and you obviously keeping it straight as possible. You kind of get it started, and we're just going down this vertical line. We're kind of keeping it at an angle. We're not cutting straight on top. You know, we want to cut through this vertical line close to the bottom, and you know, double check the top line every once in a while, but you're really looking at that vertical line going straight down. And once you get to around here, sometimes I go all the way to the bottom, but once you get to there, you're gonna cast the line outward, and that is essentially just shifting the saw's focus to be cutting outward on the top here. So now I'm following the top line, and I see it's getting close to the edge again at the top, because we've casted out our line like that. And then I'm just gonna go back down towards the bottom line. And then I'm close to this bottom line here, and I'm just gonna cast it out again. And you might notice that when you do this, when you fluctuate, that either the top or the bottom was not cutting perfectly straight. But with the combination of both of those lines being followed, it will be a straight cut. So that's just casting out the line. I'm gonna cut this tenon, and then we'll move on to mortising our top piece. So we have our tenons cut out, and now it's time for our main sawhorse piece to go on the top. Because these are sawhorses, I don't need them to be exact. So I just kind of squared them along this line, and measuring, this is 25 inches and 25 inches. And then if I refer to my other sawhorse, this is sticking out right around 4 inches on this side. Same thing here. So I'm essentially just going to place this on here and just kind of look for the center, and then, you know, measure. This is about 4 inches and about 4 inches there. So I think that's good. This isn't an exact design. I call this like an intuitive design process, especially when it comes to something like this, sawhorses. So yeah, it's set on there. It's in the center. So we're just gonna mark it based off the tenon. While I'm here, I'm just gonna label this side A. And then for our piece here, I'm just gonna do A bottom. So that way we know, we can just keep track after we mortise. It'll fit right in. We don't wanna have them swapped and have to hammer it back out. At this point, we're gonna have to flip this marking to the other side just as we did with our other mortise. We're gonna take our speed square and we're gonna bring it down, and then right here we're gonna bring this down, look down the scope and just mark. Now that we have our edge lines flipped on the other side, we're gonna repeat that same process. So starting on my right side, we're gonna measure this edge piece right on the corner. So this is right below 2 inches. And then you can see over here, it's slightly shifted. So from here, and then here. Now, the line that's on my right here is on the left. And so you're just gonna repeat this process and mirror them until you have the tenon markings on the other side of your piece. Now we can mortise. Oh wait, actually we're not done yet. We need to make our razor marks. Don't film my face. Now that we've jigsawed out our main piece, it's time to use the hammer and chisel, and this is where the razor marks are really gonna shine. I'm gonna start on this edge here. So I'm placing my chisel right into the razor edge. And I like to start on these smaller ends first and just give it a good tap. Make sure you have a good angle and you can see that your chisel is going straight down into your piece. So around halfway. It's very important that you only go halfway through your mortise before flipping it around and meeting your last mark in the middle. Did I say that right? Okay. Yeah.
I'm just gonna let this video play through me doing this mortise, but I just wanted to say the most important part is don't hammer your chisel all the way through the mortise. Just go halfway, flip it around, and meet it in the middle. Other than that, just enjoy this ASMR mortising, and the visual representation will teach you a lot as well.
And do the rest like that. I just want... There we go. One of the key parts to mortising is place the corner of your chisel into the corner of the mortise, and you can lightly tap all the way down, and this will cut anything free, so that way when you're on your side here and you go to shave some off, it's already trimmed in the corner, so there's nothing keeping it there. So from here, I'm just gonna sort of come along and get any pieces that I see sticking out and just shave them down with the chisel like this. And if there's some thicker parts like here, just come back with the hammer, shave it off. You're gonna take your framing square and you're going to put it on this edge, and if there is some bend, you can't put it flat, then that just means the middle part needs to be shaved off more. We can check it with the framing square again, and look at that. I can run along the edge, I can run along the mortise where the top of the framing square and the bottom of the framing square is touching. And if it comes up, then you know that there's still more to be shaved off. And we look good. We're on both ends all the way across. So this is ready for its fitting. And that's how you build timber frame sawhorses.